In today's show, we're going to use PowerApps to build a Super Bowl Squares app. And if you don't know what that is or you don't care about that, that's fine. Because what we're really going to do is we're going to use this to explore some cool concepts around sequence and mod and talk about some really interesting mechanics that let me build a really complicated app in a short amount of time because I kind of understood these little tools along the way. So, should be fun. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with PowerApps 911. Those guys. And today, we're going to build a Super Bowl Squares app. And so the idea of Super Bowl Squares, if you're not familiar with the concept, is it's this little piece of paper, right? Like you go to the party for the big game, and people are like, hey, you want to, give me $2 and put your name or initials in squares here. And then typically what happens is if you have the score that corresponds, or you have the square that corresponds with a score, at the end of the time, or either the quarter, or whatever they decide to do it, then you win the pot of money, or the money gets donated to charity in your name, whatever, right? I don't care how you're using it. I just know that basically at every party I've ever been at, they've had one of these. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to make our nerd level go up a little bit and build this in a Power App. And once again, if you don't care about any of that, that's fine. What we're going to really do is talk about some complex functions. No, a bunch of small, easy functions that we made into complex solutions to get this thing out the door. So let's switch over to my desktop, demo the app, and then tear it apart. Okay, so over here in the app, you can kind of see the end result, right? Like this would be the end of the night because up here at the top, so this is the score, that the Bengals would have at the end of any given period that you want to go off of, right? So if they had 24 points, then that would end in a 4. And then at the same time, if the Rams only had 1 point, I don't know how they scored a 1-pointer, but they did. That's how good the Bengals are. You can see that Chewy would have won all the money. Yay! Or all the pride, all the bragging rights, whatever you're playing for. But that's how the app works, right? That's how the process works. You write your name in here, we fill in these numbers, and then we see what the score is as the game progresses. This gives you a little thing to root for if you're not really into the game. So we're going to talk about how this all works. If we look over here on the admin side, I did a cute little new thing here, right? So if you want to get to the admin stuff, you have to know the password. It's Chewy. Surprise, surprise. And so over here is kind of where my back end is for managing all the stuff. This data is all stored out in SharePoint. So let's do two things. Let's delete all these settings real quick so we can kind of set the app back to the beginning. So delete settings. And then we're going to delete all the squares. So we're really wiping out the SharePoint list. So we'll delete all that. And while that runs, let's go over here and talk about the two SharePoint lists. So this one is the settings one. We'll refresh this real quick. As you can see, I've got some different fields here, but I don't have any values in there yet. And so that's what the app is going to populate for us as we go through the process of using the app. Now, if you want to build this at home, remember you're going to need to go here and go to list settings. And so this is what your SharePoint list would look like, just a default title set, and then create a column called point order, which is going to also be a single line of text. So really just two columns, the default title and point order. That ID one we saw over there, that's a pre-built one. And speaking of built, remember, if you just want to download my working app, all the subscribers over at training.powerapps911.com, part of the YouTube library, they have access to just download this app. You'd have to go create the SharePoint list, and then you could just be up and running in a few minutes. So this is going to be where all of our settings go, this list. The other list that I created is the Super Bowl squares, right? So these are the actual individual squares that everyone builds on. And you can see that it's a blank list. And once again, if we go to list settings, you're going to see that this one also just has two columns. It has a title, the default, change title not to be required. And then it has a column number, which is a number column. So there's only two columns you need for this particular list. All right. So since it's blank, I'm pretty sure that if we go back over here and look, we should see that nothing is here, right? So everything has been wiped out. Okay. So to get started, what I want to do is we're going to kind of start talking about how this thing works. And the key, the first big piece you see here, obviously, is a gallery. And so what I've done is I've taken this gallery here, so gallery 1, very fancy name, and I wanted it to be 10 by 10. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to pass it 100 rows, right? So that'll make it 10, right? 10 by 10 is 100. And then what you're going to do is you're going to set the wrap count to 10. So this is what makes it go 10 across. Now, right now it's blank because The items property is a collection, and we just wiped out that collection when I hit the delete everything button. So it's called col squares. So if we look at my app on start, we're going to see that it says, hey, on app start, go get col squares from Super Bowl squares, right? So load whatever's in that SharePoint list into here. There's nothing here right now. So if that is empty, which it'll be when we run this in a second, then what I want you to do is I want you to use the sequence function. Remember, so sequence creates a table of data, a single column table with a column called value. And so it's just going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 100, right? Because we want 100 squares. So I needed a quick way to generate 100 squares. So sequence 100 is going to do that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use AddColumns here to create a column in that data set called title, and I'm going to set it to be blank, right? So we're creating an empty string column, title. That's why we had to say not required over in SharePoint. And then last but not least, I don't want the column to be called value. I want it to be called column number. So we're going to use the RenameColumns function right here. And that is going to take the column that was called value that sequence generated and change its name from value to column number. And so that's where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 100, right? So that's what creates our collection. And then what we're going to do is now I want to take that collection, even though it's blank, it really is just 1 through 100. I want to create all those blank objects on my data source. And to do that, we're going to use collect. So collect our SharePoint list and then a collection that will just take and bulk push that whole thing up there, right? It's not that efficient. It sounds efficient. It's not. But it stopped me from having to like loop through and create a bunch of stuff or write some PowerShell to create 100 items in SharePoint, right? Just by running this one section of code, it's going to take that collection we just created and push it out to SharePoint. And remember, we're only doing this if it's empty, which will be that first run through. So then after that is done, what we're going to do is we're going to go and refetch the data. So you're like, Shane, you just pushed the data there. Why are you getting it back? Because I needed the ID field. So when it gets pushed to SharePoint, all those columns get an ID column, right? So ID 400, 500, whatever it might be. I need that back in order to facilitate updating it. So I pushed it. Once it's done pushing, I pull it back. It's kind of silly, but it was what I needed to do to make it work the way I wanted. Okay? So if we just let's just take this chunk of code and copy, and let's put that on a button real quick so we can just run it. So we're just going to do that, paste, and we're just going to press this button. And you can see it's gray, and it's going to take a moment. The collection created real fast. So boom, there's the collection, but the button's still grayed out. The little ants marching, as they call it, the little dots going across the top are still here because it's still out there in SharePoint pushing to the Super Bowl squares. And so you can see that it is currently pushed 67. If we refresh again, 95. And so by the time we get back over here, it's done. Okay, so that's how we populate the SharePoint list and then get the data in there. Let's get rid of that button for now. Okay, so then in here now, each one of these, right? So we said now we got 100 squares, 10 by 10. And that's because, right, we're passing it that data. And so what I put in here is a couple of things. So one is I have the title. So the titles are all blank, so you don't see anything there. But that's where we're going to put the person who wants to own the squares data in a few minutes or in a moment. And then this icon 1, what it does is it's going to cause a pop-up to show. So let's press it. So let's go right here. Let's click on this square right here, right? So this would be 10, 11, so this would be square 12. And so here you can now see my first really complicated piece of code. So I want to know what square they're in, right? And I know that they're in square 12, but I need to know that that is row 2 and down 2, right? So here is the first thing I did. So what I had to do is I had to do some math. I like math. I had fun with this. This is why I did this whole video. And so I'm using the with function here to say, hey, the square number equals the value I just passed, right? So 12. And then I said, all right, I need another with inside there. And I said, all right, if I want you to do a mod on 12, right? So mod 12, 10, that's going to have a remainder of 2, right? Because mod says take the number you gave me, so we gave it 12, divide it by 10, so it goes in there one time, but that doesn't matter. It says I would have a remainder of 2. So if I gave it 29, it'd have a remainder of 9. If I gave it 83, it'd have a remainder of 3. It's just dividing by 10 and kind of get me that, that rightmost digit. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to store that value into this function, or this with variable called column number. And so I'm saying, hey, if column number is not equal to 0, because what I found is if they have the 10th, if they chose the 10th one, that causes some special logic. So I need a set of logic that works for cells 1 to 9, but a different one whether they choose 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc. So if it is not equal to 0, then that's, like in our case, it's 12, right? Because our column number is currently 2. So if 2 is not equal to 0, then I want you to use the column number 2. And then what I need to do is I want you to take the, right, remember that's the column number. And then for the row number is not as hard. So the row number is really just the number, so 12 divided by 10, which is 1. Yes, so wait, so square number, no, yes, yeah. Square number is 12. So 12 divided by 10, so that's going to be 1 point something, right? And so then I'm saying round that down to 0, so then that way it'll round to 1. And then 1 plus 1 is 2, right? Because 12 is on the second row. So that's how we get to the second row. And that is how it knows, do you want to claim the square 2, 2? It's how it knows that square 12 is on 2, 2. Now, if the mod number here was equal to, or had a mod of 0, right? So this column number mod 10. So if you took 30 divided by 10, there's a remainder of 0, right? So we got 0. So in that case, we're going to make it 10, right? Because we know that they're in the last column, right? So 30 would be in the 10th column. And then we're just going to divide by 10 to get the left number. So we should be able to confirm that, right? But that's how you can see 2. So before we claim a square, let's just go over here and click on, what is this? This should be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Yep, so row 10, or column 10, row 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our little mod math works. That was one of the hardest parts of this whole app for me, was getting all of that logic done. And of course, you can just steal it and don't have to understand how it works. No problem. So then now if we want to claim this square, we have to put in our name. So I have Chewy in there right now. And so then what we're going to do is we're going to patch the collection to show that Chewy owns that square. And then we're going to patch the SharePoint list, and we're going to patch that same record in the SharePoint list that Chewy owns the square. And then we're going to close the pop-up in the spinner. So if we click on this and we say claim, it spins for a second. And now over here on the right, Chewy owns 10. If we go up here, we could, right, because a lot of times you buy multiple ones. That's why I'm not resetting this, but you can clear it out. So now I can be like, I'm buying one, right? So I can claim that one. And then we'll go down here and yeah, I'll just claim that one too. Okay, so we've claimed some squares. That's the first piece of this. And if we were to look at our SharePoint list, if we were to refresh this now, you would see there it is. I claimed square 11, I claimed square 43, and Chewy claimed square 60. So we're updating our data source as we go, because you might want to close the app. Who knew? You might actually want to turn this thing off along the way. Or you might have multiple people. It doesn't matter. Okay, so now we've got this done, right? And so let's pretend like at this point, everyone has consumed all their squares. Now, I guess I should point out, let me claim that first square. Let's claim this one. We'll just say Nicola, grab this one. So you notice that like the check mark shows up versus the label. So what I really did here was I'm like, hey, label, your visible property is if the title is blank and is empty top collection row. So you're going to see this row come up here at the top in a minute with the point values. So if that's blank, then that would come through. So that's why we see Nicola in this case, because title is not blank. And title's visible property, honestly, I think is just always there. It's just if there's nothing to show, then it's not showing anything. Okay, so we've claimed some squares. So let's go back over here, go to admin. This was just something new I thought of today. So all I'm doing here, if you're wondering how that is working, is I created a black rectangle and I said, hey, you are visible if this is not equal to Chewy. So if they don't have Chewy typed in this box, then it's visible. If they do have Chewy typed in the box, then it's not visible. So just a different way to kind of lock the screen. I've done password screens and stuff different ways. I thought that was a different way to do it, so I did it. I don't know. Okay, So now that you've gotten all the people to claim all the squares that you want, right? Kickoff's about to happen. It's time to go. So as an admin, what you're going to do is you're going to click on this button. And so what this is going to do is this is going to create a collection by doing the sequence, right? So we need a sequence, but this time we want a sequence of 10 numbers, but we want to start at 0, right? Because when we think about points, right, it's 0 because you could have a score of 0 or you could have a score of 10, right? Both have a 0 on the far right digit to 9. So it's 10 numbers, but it's 0 to 9. Okay, so that's what that does. That generates us a collection or a table of 0 to 9. Then we're using shuffle. So if you don't ever use shuffle, shuffle's kind of fun. It just takes your table and messes it up, right? So it's like, all right, 6, 4, 5, 2, 1, right? It just made it a different order. That's where we're going to get the randomness that we want. And then last but not least, I am adding a column called value1. And so the column value1, what I'm doing is I am setting it to be the value, right? So 0 through 9, whatever number it currently is using, but as a text, because I wanted to use the numbers as text instead of as numbers. I could have done it the other way. For whatever reason, I chose to do it as text. Okay, so that creates a collection called top row 1. I then create another collection here. I wanted row numbers. I needed to know that 6 was on the first row and 7 was on the third row, right? I need to know where they're at in the list to do what I want to do in a minute. So I use this little section here to take that collection and make a new collection called call top row without the 1 at the end that has row numbers. So we do that for the top row. We do the same exact thing for the left row. And then what I'm going to do is I want to save that out there in that settings list that we had. So I am patching the first record, right? Because that's the first team, in our case, Bengals. Yay, Bengals. And we're going to say, set the point order, and we're using the concat function to turn that into 6, 5, 2, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Let's press the button and see how it all happens. So we're going to press the button. The button is grayed out because the collections are populated. I wouldn't want people doing this multiple times. But now if we can look up here, we can see that call top row 1. Oh, let's make this smaller so it's easier for you guys to see. Hang on. So call top row 1, right, has 2 values, right? This one is a number. This one's the value 1. That is the number as text. And then the collection call top row, the one I wanted, right, it has that row number. So you can see that the first row is 5, the second row is 7, the third row is 6, et cetera, et cetera. So that did that both for the right and the left. And if we look at SharePoint, oh, right here. So if we refresh this now, you should see the Bengals. Look, there's its point order. So that's that same data in that same order. Order matters. And then we did the same thing for the Rams, right? The Rams are on the left. So if we go back over to our app and we go back to the other screen now, you're going to see there's those numbers in that order. So now we've assigned the point values. And you always do this in these square games after the fact because you don't want people buying the square that they want. Like, who doesn't want 0, 0? Who doesn't want 4, 4 and 1, 1, right? Some of those common point totals. And nobody wants 2, 2, right? What's the odds that their score will ever be 2, 2? Almost none. So you're going to avoid those numbers. So that's why we randomly place these. But now Chewy can find out that he has 2, 6. That's a pretty bad one. The chances of that winning anything are pretty low for Chewy. I like this one though. My 7, 6 here. Yeah, that's not a bad one to have right there. Okay. So I'm excited. But so that assigned the data. All right. And they're not actually connected anyway. We're just using a different gallery up here. This one's just showing call top row and it is set to a wrap count of 10. And then this is literally just a normal vertical route gallery, with the column of 1. Okay. So now the game starts and we get to the end of the first quarter and the score is going to be 2-2 because I said it was impossible, right? So we go over here as the admin and we're going to say set the score of 2 to 2 and then say set quarter 1. Now if we go back over here, we're going to see that we get a little label here, Q1. So we know this is the square that won. No one got it. So charity gets that. It rolls over. It just depends on how you do your pot. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look and we're going to see that there's actually a little label right here, label 9. And so it is only visible if this row item's column number is equal to var Q1. So how did var Q1 get set? Well, you probably guess it was when I pressed that button. I wish I didn't know. I need to turn this password thing off. This is annoying. Chewy. So if we look here at set Q1, we're going to see that on select of this button, we set var Q1. And so this was me having to do crazy math again. It took me probably 15 minutes to figure this out. That's okay. But what I'm doing is I am taking the Rams value, right? So the second value, the purple one, and I am looking up to see what row it's in, and I'm subtracting 1, and then I'm multiplying it by 10, right? Because I'm undoing the redoing of the math that I did to get the data in there. And so in the case of a 2, so what we're doing is we're going and we're looking up in this collection, we're saying, hey, where's the 2? Well, 2 is in row 2, ironically enough, right? It was purely on accident. But so we're taking 2, we're subtracting 1, so it gives us 1. 1 times 10 is 10. If we look, var Q1 is 20. All right, so we know it's 10 plus, then we did a lookup of this, and we're going to say, all right, so look, the other 2, so the 2 for the top row is in row 10. And so we said 10 plus 10 is 20. And so that's how we got it, right? So I had to work through the math logic to be able to know where I was on the position chart and then get back to there based on the scores. But that gives me the 20. So I know that the 20th column is where 2 is. And then I am going to write that out to SharePoint, right? I want SharePoint to know. So if we look out here again, we should now see that Q1 has 2, 2. So that way we can put the data back in. And then we patch that, and then we set the variable with that value. The reason I set the variable is because if you look at these, they are taking whatever is stored over in var Q1 and splitting it, and that's how it is being displayed, right? So this was showing the first number. This one is, if we go to text for it, or default, sorry, not text, it is showing the second number. Okay, so that's how that works, because it's important, because what I wanted to happen, and this was the challenge, is what happens if I close my browser, right? I want all these settings to come back. So I had to recreate a lot of this logic back here on App OnStart. Remember, so we talked about the first portion, but now that we understand how the top rows come from, right? Well, the top row has to get repopulated from the SharePoint list and then have the row numbers added back. The left column has to get repopulated from our SharePoint list and then put the column numbers back. Then the var Q1 record, the thing we were just looking at, right? We got to go get that from SharePoint again. So then that is set. And then last but not least, when we have the record, we have to set the var Q1. But remember, var Q1 is derived from this, right? var Q1 record has got the 2, 2. So we have to use the 2, 2 to do the math again to find out that that's 20. So that all gets set. And then we blank out some of those variables I used for session state. But the best thing you can do at this point, is that we have to make sure this really works, right? So what I'm going to do is just file save and close and open it again, just to prove that everything gets put back. Because making the app resilient from closing and opening is the whole reason that we saved it to SharePoint to begin with. So you got to set things into SharePoint and store them and use them in your app. But then you have to, on App OnStart, rehydrate all that stuff so it all works. And look at that, everything comes right back to where it was. The numbers are in the same order. All the same squares are still owned. 2, 2 was still the Q1 score. So that's a big challenge here, or that was the harder part of this app. I think now obviously you could go back over here, admin. You could do Chewy again, and so if I wanted to set a Q2 score, so look, I found a bug that I didn't know I had. So the set Q2 score is blanked out, and how is it disabled? So let's check. So we'll say display mode. If is blank var Q2. Well, it's not. It has got -10 stored in there right now. So what did I do wrong? I'm pretty sure that if we go back over here, so we know App OnStart is what set that. Don't you love when I screw up? It's always a fun way to learn. So if we go look at set var Q2, what did it do? It looked in var Q2 record, which came back as without any settings. So it said, all right, go look and split var Q2, whatever, right? So the split came back as 0. And so when that returns 0, 0 minus 1 is -1. -1 times 10 is -10 plus 0. So see, I didn't mean to screw this up, but I did. So then what I think we need to do here, let's just fix this together, is I think I'm going to add some type of if logic. And so I'm going to say, let's go right here. So we'll say if var q1 record, let's see, dot, what field is that? Point order. So if its point order is blank, yeah. So we'll just say if it's blank. So if it's blank, I don't want to do anything, right? So you can just say false, don't do anything. No, that'll make it mad. We're just going to say if it is not blank, so we'll put an exclamation point out here in front. We'll go here to the end, like so. There you go. So if it's blank, if it's not blank, then set this. If it is, then it won't. So now we'll take that same logic. We'll go right here. We'll paste that. We'll change this from var q1 to var q2. I got to do lots of this. And it was really kind of annoying that I had 4 functions that were repetitive, and I have 2 different sets of them. It got real tiring, but all right. So there is q3. And then right here, we've got Q4. And then, of course, I got to go close all those ifs. So I closed that if. Let's close that if. Let's close that if. And close that if. OK. So now to confirm that I fixed it right, what am I going to do? I'm going to run OnStart again. And we're going to be annoyed that this did not blank out. Why did that not come through? Well, let's check again. App. Oh, you know what it is? It's because the variables are set now and I'm not setting them back to blank. All right. So the true test before I try to write anything else, because I think I'm fixing problems I don't actually have, is let's reboot PowerApps again. So that way all my variables blank back out. We'll edit the app one more time. All right. App loaded back up. And let's go back over here. Let's type in Chewy again. Oh, much better. All right. So I'd fixed the problem right to begin with, but I forgot that the variables were already set. So then now we could set a score for this quarter. Right now it is 4 to 3. And then we'd set Q2. And then let's set Q3 as well. Right? Because one of the things that might be confusing, so 21 to 18. Right? So if we set Q3. So one of the people I showed this to beforehand were like confused because I kept using small numbers. I was doing that to be easier. But if you look at our code here, we're grabbing only the right digit because that's all that you care about in one of these scenarios. But it still works if you put the full score. So even though I put 2118, we should see that Q3 is in 18. So let's just check that out. Go back over here. So Bengals 1, Rams 8, Q3 is the win. So that was a little daunting for someone else, right? Like they didn't understand why. In my demos, I was using single digit numbers. You do not have to, right? And so if the final score is 42 to, what do we think, 25? Let's say that's the final score. I hope that's the final score. I'd be really happy if that was the final score. So we set that last one, and bammo, there's a 2, and then there's a 5. Now, if you're playing with this, if you're trying to build it yourself, and you're trying to test your logic, right? Like, I think that a lot of fun would be to go build this on your own. The corner cases are the hardest ones, right? So figure out, can you get the Q4 to show up in this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner, right? If you can get those pieces, if you can get those to work, then you know your logic is correct. But this whole like bouncing between rows, the adding 10, subtracting 10, dividing by 10s, it's a little daunting. But there you go. There is my Super Bowl Squares app. So hopefully you guys found that kind of fun. I think there's a lot of interesting logic to be had in here. The other thing about this I want to just kind of show real quick. So, I literally wrote this thing today in just a very, very short amount of time. And so to help me iterate faster, I did set up like this button here for removing all the Super Bowl squares, right? So that deletes out all the SharePoint lists. So if I needed to clear that SharePoint list out, I could press this, right? So nothing you're actually going to use, But a lot of times when I'm building and learning or trying to go faster, having buttons like that that help me quickly populate data or delete data will make your life easier. The same with delete settings, right? Like I kept just adding more and more and more to this as I kept working through the different logic scenarios, so that way I could really set the app back to 0 at any given point. But I separated them because one of the things I kept wanting to test was I wanted to get rid of all of this stuff but leave the squares, right? So now if we go back over here, we're back to that portion. We haven't assigned the top row or the left row, so I can claim more squares, right? So hi. And so then now I am jumping in here and I'm claiming some squares. And so then now that I'm claiming squares, and I didn't write a way to unclaim squares. You could, I just didn't do it. But now that I've claimed some more squares, now I'm happy, right? Because we had another second, there's 5 more minutes of commercials, who knew? So now we go back over here, and then Chewy again. And then I load my point rows again. And now we're back. And now we get to see what numbers everyone got, right? They're different numbers this time because it's all using shuffle and auto magic. So gives you a chance to iterate. So as you're building out and you're thinking about that type of stuff, use those type of techniques to go faster. Okay, that's everything I've got today. Hopefully you enjoy this. If you do use it, tweet me at Shane's Cows and tell me that you used this and that you won big money and that you said, hooray! Right, we want the Bengals to win, in case you didn't know. If the Bengals don't win, I'll probably be real sad face, but it'll be okay. All right, and with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Hey, me again. Before you go, click on the subscribe button, right? Join the list of 100,000 plus people that have subscribed already. Or if you need any help, right? Check us out at PowerApps 911. We do big projects, little projects, we do training, we do everything, and we can help you. Or if you want to see more videos, you probably do, then just click on the playlist above. Cool? Thanks, and have a great day.